it might seem separate, is directly related to the entire conversation we've been having around neuroendocrine, immune, psycho function, right? Because romantic relationships are the most consequential relationships that we humans will ever have. Our romantic partners are simultaneously our parents. And if that sounds weird to you, think about it. Your romantic partner, who do you call when you get sick? Who do you call if your car breaks down? They are 1000% parenting you and you are parenting them. They also are your best friends. They're your lover. They're your mentor. They're your comic relief. Hopefully they do everything. And they are 100% also a cortisol lowering blanket for us. They are the thing that helps us re-optimize and get into safeness mode. So when we get off the plains of Africa, we go into the house and we have a romantic partner there, we will calm much more quickly. Now, part of the reason I wrote this book is for that reason, because the idea here is just like we are very wrong, I think, in the way we approach health and fitness, we also are very wrong oftentimes in the way we approach personal development and especially romantic relationships. And, you know, I'm a child of the 80s, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Jerry Maguire, but this is a classic. Jerry Maguire is, for those of you who haven't seen it, he's a wheeling dealing, sports agent who, basically develops a conscience, falls in love with a new woman, gets married, and he's struggling to, essentially become his next level human self as he fights this wheeling dealing tendency of this old sports agent. And the movie ends with him coming in to his new wife. They're on the verge of breaking up. And he says, "You complete me." And then, of course, Renee Zellweger, who plays the wife, Dorothy Board, goes, shut up. You had me at hello." And this drives me nuts, which is why I wrote the book, because I go, great movie, one of my favorite movies, but Hollywood always ends these love stories when we all know shit's getting ready to get hard. So then we're supposed to believe they run off into the sunset and live happily ever after, when in reality, what ends up happening is a whole host of things that are crazy. Piss stains, toilet seats, yelling and screaming over who takes the garbage out, all the stuff that happens in relationship. And so I wrote the book to say, essentially, it's not about you complete me. It's about you grow me. Our romantic partners are not supposed to complete ourselves as if we are jigsaw puzzles. They are meant to help us grow to our next level human selves. They are meant to help us be the hero. And we are meant to do that themselves. To use some of the stuff we've been talking about, they're meant to help us not be the villain and the victim, but to become the victor. They're meant to help us grow to our best place. And what we think is, and I want to see what you two think about this, but what we think is, in our culture, we've got it all wrong. We think that if a relationship ends, then it's been not successful. And I go, that is completely wrong. A relationship is successful if it helped you grow to be a better person. And sometimes the relationships that end are the things that taught us the most about ourselves. And by the way, relationships always end without doubt. It's common sense. We all die. This isn't The Notebook. We're not going to die hand in hand, dying at the same time with our significant other. And so relationships always end no matter what. The difference is, are you a better human, more next level human, more growth oriented, healthier, more effective, more purpose driven for having been in the relationship? So this really is a philosophy book wrapped in the romance clothing.
I love it. And I love the point you make about, if you use your kind of African savannah analogy, I think some people find themselves in the scenario where they're out in the savannah, there's threat of the lion, then they get into the house though, and then maybe that other person is the new threat, right? So they're never out of kind of that fight or flight mode, and then over time your central nervous system is just completely smoked, and no matter what biohacking you're doing, it doesn't freaking matter. So hopefully that's a lesson as for people listening. If you think you're in that analogy of maybe you go to a stressful job, you're getting your ass handed to you with just all kind of stressful things. Okay, that's your threat during the day, and then you get home, and then it's a totally different stress. Maybe someone run around the house with a knife or something. Of course, I'm using an analogy here. You're never going to be out of that mode, even when you're sleeping. So I love how you put that into context. And yes, the goal there is that person is the safe space that allows you to recharge, not drain the battery even more. And I think, we all need to find that. one of the questions I had, in regards to the book is, as you obviously you said there's a philosophical component to this, and you might have already answered it, but what do you think is the most important thing in a relationship?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. To me, the most important thing in a relationship is communication. Now, a lot of people would say that, but it's communication in a different way, right? It's the ability to hear, listen, and respond, and also receive. All of that goes in to communication. So here's the thing. When we say communication, people go, oh yeah, that's a great personal development sort of thing. It is true. But the idea is, what is engaged in communication? What do we have to do and learn and be to actually communicate effectively? And this goes right back to exactly what we were talking about in the beginning with psychology. If we have these misguided unconscious decisions, these knots tied in our psychology, then the way we communicate is going to be contingent on those knots, those misguided unconscious decisions. So it's not enough to just say communicate. We have to understand what these stories are. And so one step further, the most important thing about a relationship is to know yourself and be authentic, not to a past self and a current self, but to your next level human self, and communicate from that point of view, and insist that your romantic partner also doesn't see you as a past self or a current self, but sees you as your next level human self and communicates within that. In every relationship, we've got three entities, right? There's you, there's me, and then there's the entity we create when we're together, what I call you/me, or we'll just call it you, me. What most people do is they make a mistake and they go, oh, I just became you, me, and I'll give up myself. So me becomes you, me. And they lose themselves in that. And you can't do that. So when you're communicating in a relationship, you have got to incorporate yourself and others simultaneously. And this is a good rule for next level humans in general. It's not about you only neglecting others. And it's also not about others only neglecting you. You must meet yourself and other simultaneously. And when you do that, and you've unwound all these unconscious decisions and dealt with all your traumas and your struggles, you can meet this person in a place where they can elevate you. If you don't, it doesn't matter how much communication you have, you'll still be stuck in your own patterns. So I hope people understand that, because obviously you have got to do your work and then the work in the relationship, and together that can amplify you. But if you haven't done your work and you expect that you-me dynamic to just make you all hunky-dory and okay, it's never going to work that way. This is real work and is the most healing work you can do, but it means you must simultaneously work on yourself and the romantic relationship, and you cannot give yourself over fully to the you-me.
Yeah, that's such an important part of this. And I think what you said too is like, I always look at it as an analogy of like a mirror. Like when you're in a relationship, it truly is a mirror to the deeper or higher versions of yourself. But that dance, as you said, that dance can't become a dance where it's a meshing of two psyches in a way that the individuality gets lost. So it's such that dance is so complex. And I know I could sit here and talk about it for hours, just as far as like how that plays out, and then the subtlety in which you deal with that. Because when you're in that, it's very hard, similar to like we said about trying to identify those knots. Like there has to be a space, and you have to work on a space where those things can be addressed together. Otherwise it comes out in weird ways. And I'm sure we've all had that before, where you're in a relationship and you get to the end of an argument and you're like, what am I doing? Like, why, how is this even coming? Like, this isn't what I think, but like, you tie yourself in knots. And then if that doesn't get readdressed, all of a sudden the resentment builds because you're perceiving each other in a way that's actually not reality. And then I love what you said of like, you, the same way I think like a very calibrated human pulls forward or pulls back, almost has a version of themselves that's not yet in reality, but they've mapped out how to get there, and they pull that into reality through action, through a level of consciousness. It's the same thing for a relationship. If you're not viewing each other in that light, and even if one partner kind of just sinks into the relationship and says, I'm happy, like this is all I wanted, while the other one's kind of driving forward, there's going to be a dissonance there too. So that's like a perfect example of like, you've got to be on the same page regarding that, and regarding your expectations of like self and relationship, because if not, it creates a dynamic that gets not always volatile, but just subtly complex in a way that unpacking becomes almost impossible. And then what happens down the road is like there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back. And although it was like a million little decisions that went into it, it's going to implode on itself because it wasn't built on like a foundational truth between both parties.
I love that so much, Tony. And, and one way we can make this a pithy little phrase is that, people want partners. They don't want projects, which means we have got to become a full embodied person right from the get-go. And when you begin to grow yourself and others simultaneously and push towards this next level human self. By the way, all this other stuff for you younger guys who are listening to this, all this other stuff about how to pick up women, how to do this or that, and for you women about how to manage yourself and all this stuff, all that stuff begins to go away because, as Tony said, you become your perfect sort of self outside of the relationship, and you begin to attract, almost like a tuning fork. You begin to vibrate and attract a particular type of person. So the idea with this particular book is don't go find somebody, create your next level human self, and you will automatically recognize them. So it's not the law of attraction, it's the law of recognition. It's like if the three of us decide we're going to get a car, right? And Tony, you're like, you know what, I'm going to get a red Tesla, I think. And you hadn't even thought about the Tesla, but all of a sudden Tesla starts showing up everywhere, right? As if by magic. And for some reason, a lot of them are red. And then you notice my next door neighbor has a red Tesla. That's crazy. You didn't create it. You didn't draw it into existence. You primed your nervous system to recognize it. It's the same way in relationships. What this book teaches is become your next level human self. Now meet someone who can continue to grow you along that line. But when you become it and you're in process, you resonate and you can recognize everyone who will help. And by the way, they get to recognize you. And all of a sudden, all this stuff about throwing out lines and being this particular way and attracting people and all these tools and techniques fall away because your authentic self, next level human self, starts walking into the world and you become attractive in a whole other way, and you become attracted to people in a whole other way. It helps you escape the culture level dating game, the culture level romance game altogether. And all of a sudden, everything begins to change. And it's really just about understanding this philosophy of unwinding our past selves, dismantling our identity to go back to the beginning and restructuring ourselves as a next level human. And that then changes everything. And it works, by the way, in health and fitness. It works in romance. It works in finance. It works in purpose and meaning. And those are our 4 jobs, right? We only have 4 jobs as humans. We got to earn and manage money. Even if you're out on the street, you got to procure food and find shelter. You got to attain and maintain health and fitness. You got to manage, give and receive love with personal relationships. And you got to find meaning and make a difference. And so everything we talked about in this podcast fits into this, but the romantic realm is a huge thing that can either help or hinder, and you really need to know how to manage it. And that's why I wrote this book. It's a philosophy book to help you become a next level human so you can attract a next level human partner.